Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: American chipmakers Nvidia and AMD agreeing to pay the U.S. government 15% of revenue from one of their biggest markets in exchange a permit for selling some of their microchips to China.
The chip that we're talking about, the H20, it's an old chip. China already has it in a different form, different name.
A new chip deal between the U.S. and Nvidia is stirring up questions about export legality, national security, and the future of AI. What's really at stake in this high-tech trade negotiation?
This is a very calculated move by the tech firms, knowing full well that they can't depend on Trump to remain consistent on the policy of selling these chips.
A 7-year-old U.S. citizen barred from leaving China. A human rights advocacy group is calling on Beijing to lift the exit ban. The CEO of American chip giant Intel met with President Trump on Monday. Last week, President Trump and others called for CEO Libutan's resignation. That's over his business ties to China. A high-tech business transaction is coming down the pipeline in exchange for a permit to sell microchips to China. U.S. chipmakers Nvidia and AMD have agreed to pay the U.S. government 15% of revenue from sales of some chips to China. Here's what President Donald Trump said Monday.
So when I say I want 20, I want for the country. I only care about the country. I don't care about myself. And he said, would you make it 15? So we negotiate a little deal.
The deal includes chips like Nvidia's H20 that are used for artificial intelligence applications. Citing national security concerns, the Trump administration blocked sales of H20 chips to China back in April. But the White House reversed course last month, saying it would allow sales to China to resume. Here's what President Trump said about the shift.
The chip that we're talking about, the H20, it's an old chip. China already has it in a different form, different name.
As for other Nvidia chips like an advanced next-generation model called Blackwell, Trump says he won't allow the company to sell it to China in its original form.
The Blackwell is super duper advanced. I wouldn't make a deal with that, although it's possible I'd make a deal, a somewhat enhanced in a negative way Blackwell. In other words, take 30% to 50% off of it. But that's the latest and the greatest in the world. Nobody has it. They won't have it for 5 years.
China represents a significant market for both Nvidia and AMD. The China market accounted for 24% of total revenue for AMD as of last year and 13% of total sales for Nvidia in the fiscal year ending in late January this year. When asked if Nvidia agreed to pay 15% of its China-based revenue to the U.S., a company spokesperson said, quote, "We follow rules the U.S. government sets for our participation in worldwide markets." China's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment. As the U.S. works out an arrangement with Nvidia and AMD for selling high-end chips to China, some are questioning whether the deal crosses legal lines. Senior national security editor at the National Interest, Brandon Weichert, says tech firms may have a bigger strategy in mind.
I think what a lot of these companies are saying and doing is they're trying to basically ensnare the U.S. government in this policy of selling high-end computer chips to China, so that if Trump one day were to wake up and say, I don't like what China's doing, I'm going to slap a tariff on those chips going in to China to make them pay for it, this would possibly make them stop. Make the Trump administration or whoever's running the government stop because, hey, we're getting 15%. We're getting a VIG off of these sales of high-end chips to China. Yeah, we don't like what China's doing with those chips, but we're making a lot of money and we can do a lot with that. So we don't want to slap on tariffs on those products. This is a very calculated move by the tech firms, knowing full well that they can't depend on Trump to remain consistent on the policy of selling these chips.
The concern goes beyond microchips and extends into defense supply chains that are critical for national security. Experts warn that many U.S. military suppliers rely heavily on China for its rare earth minerals, making any conflict risky. Brandon Weichert explains how companies might use deals like Nvidia's as a blueprint to protect their interests even amid trade tensions.
I believe it was Raytheon's executive 2 years ago who said going to war with China would be suicide because something like 60 or 70% of our defense industrial supply chain, either directly or indirectly, emanates from or passes through China. And of course, the Chinese could absolutely disrupt those supply chains and thereby strangulate our defense establishment. So something that, yes, these companies could do to kind of stymie an American president or administration from possibly taking aggressive action against China at a later date would be to do a similar deal to what Nvidia is doing with, hey, we'll give you 15% or whatever cut of our sales, of the supply chain going through China. Just let us keep those supply chains. It's very convenient and it keeps our shareholders happy. So that is something. I don't think they would directly, I could be wrong about that, but I can't imagine Lockheed would directly sell only because they know there are other methods Congress and the Defense Department and the President could use to stop them. But there are indirect things. And this deal with Nvidia could very well kind of inform future moves by future American firms wanting to do business or to maintain business with China, even if the U.S. government is doing these tariffs and protectionist measures against China.
Earlier last week, China claimed Nvidia's H20 AI chips could risk its own national security, suggesting they could have embedded surveillance. But Weichert says China's actual stance is likely more posturing than fact.
Yeah, make no mistake, China wants these chips, and they view this as a blessing and a great opportunity to move their AI, particularly their AI, artificial intelligence development forward. They need high-end chips to do this, to do AI, and to keep a pace with the Americans. And so whatever they're saying publicly, that's for show. That's them driving a hard bargain, which is what the Eurasians do when it comes to trade. The Russians do something similar as well. That's just the sort of the culture and the nature over there. They want those chips.
There are still questions looming over whether exporting these chips is legal, but it's clear that both the U.S. and China are continuing to play a strategic game with trade and AI. Tuesday is the deadline to extend the trade truce between the U.S. and China. President Trump dodged a question on Monday about whether he would extend the deadline and postpone when higher U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will kick in. Take a listen.
China's been, we've been dealing very nicely with China, as you probably have heard. They have tremendous tariffs that they're paying to the United States of America, and we'll see what happens.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said last week that a 90-day extension of the U.S.-China tariff truce is likely. He added that it depends on the trade team's decision and President Trump. Trade with China is in the spotlight. President Trump said Sunday he hopes China would quadruple its soybean orders from the U.S. The president says if that happens, it would cut down a major chunk of Beijing's trade deficit with Washington.
Trump wrote on social media that China is worried about its shortage of soybeans. He says great U.S. farmers produce the most robust soybeans. The president added that rapid service would be provided, and he thanked communist leader Xi Jinping. China is the largest soy importer in the world, but it has been shunning U.S. beans for South American ones following trade and diplomatic tensions. Trade talks between U.S. and Chinese officials are ongoing. Triple-digit tariffs imposed by Trump and Beijing were paused for 90 days in May to allow time for talks.
A 7-year-old American citizen is banned from leaving China, and a San Francisco-based advocacy group is taking action. The group is calling on Beijing to lift the exit ban. The child's name is Gov't. Here's his story.
Gov't has been banned from coming back to the U.S. for 1 year. Chinese authorities arrested his father last year on a family trip to China. The father is a dissident artist known for creating artwork mocking the Chinese Communist Party leadership. Both the father and mother are green card holders. The Duihua Foundation, a human rights advocacy group in San Francisco, said the 7-year-old Gao has been unable to attend a school for a full year. Beijing imposes exit bans on Americans traveling to China at will. Just last month, the regime barred a Wells Fargo executive from leaving China, accusing him of being involved in a criminal case. The foundation estimated last year that over 30 Americans are under China's exit bans currently.
The CEO of American chip giant Intel met with President Trump on Monday. Tan provided extensive details about his personal and professional background during the meeting. This comes after President Trump called on him to resign due to his ties to China last week. President Trump posted on Truth Social that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent were also at the meeting. He said Tan's success and rise is an amazing story. Trump added that his cabinet members are going to spend time together and bring suggestions to him next week. Tan has put at least $200 million into hundreds of China-based chipmakers and high-end manufacturers over the years. Those investments include top Chinese telecom device maker ZTE. During Trump's first term, the U.S. government banned sales and device imports from ZTE due to its close ties to the Chinese military. But while the U.S. raises concerns about Tan, Chinese media is praising him. Back in June, a Chinese state-controlled newspaper published a report praising Tan's accomplishments just 3 months after he became Intel CEO. The report specifically applauded Tan for his investments in China's tech sector through venture capital firm Walden International. Tan founded Walden in the late 80s. The company described itself as a, quote, pioneer venture investing in China. The Intel CEO posted a letter to address public concerns last week, saying he fully shares President Trump's commitment to strengthening U.S. national security. That's despite President Trump calling his China investment highly conflicted. To further discuss whether Americans should trust Tan to head the American tech giant and how other U.S. businesses involved with China adapt to competition, NTD's Alice Tang spoke with senior China affairs analyst Alan Zhen. They also spoke about the evolving tech contest between the U.S. and China.
Can we still trust what Tan says when he says that he shares Trump's commitment to advancing U.S. security?
Personally, I cannot say specific about him without my own investigative reporting. One thing that we can do is what you are doing. Okay, grow America-based Chinese media, even especially Chinese American media, to really inform them and educate them. Give them the right value system. They need to be loyal to this country that they are living in. Okay, don't fall into the trap of Chinese government. But our government, I'm talking about the United States, I think is not necessarily even aware of such problem, let alone finding a solution to them. But there are solutions. So this is the importance of the Chinese, I would say Chinese language media, and also media like yours. We have to do the job, and then win them over to the right side.
I want to ask you is that if Intel CEO does step down, so what message does that send to the other U.S. companies and businesses who does have ties to China?
Yeah, if he has to step down, I think it's a positive thing. Okay, it sends a clear warning to all the other companies that they need to be watch out for it, especially for those, we're talking about thousands of Chinese high-tech professionals who are on the path of Mr. Tan. They're growing to be, more important position. They're going to found their own companies. They are all very intelligent. They are all very hardworking, and they become very experienced now. They are very valuable to this country. Okay, that's why they become target. Again, I think the fundamental solution is to give the right value system to Chinese American here, first generation. Oftentimes they came here for a good, better life. They do not came here for some noble cause. Some of them do, but most of them came here for a good life. And then, Chinese government, they'll tell them first, I give you a noble cause, help with the revival of China. Second, you're going to benefit. You're going to be rewarded tremendously. So it's easy for them to fall into that trap. But if the United States of America, if the media are vigilant enough, diligent enough, we can win them over. Okay, because everybody loves freedom.
Oh, what a terrible fall from grace, and such a good warning to all of us. Alan Zheng, thank you so much for shedding light on this topic. We really appreciate your time.
Sure, thank you.
Coming up, a power shift is growing among high-ranking officials in the Chinese Communist Party. A senior Chinese diplomat has reportedly been arrested. He was widely seen as a potential candidate for foreign minister. A rare mishap for China's Navy. 2 Chinese ships collided while chasing Philippine vessels in waters both countries claim for their own, and those waters are just off the Philippine coast. What the Philippine president says:
we do not want any kind of confrontation with anyone.
And the Chinese Communist Party's long arm into the art world. Artwork with a critical eye towards Beijing has been pulled from one of Thailand's top galleries at China's request. That and more after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A senior Chinese diplomat has reportedly been arrested. Liu Jianchao was widely seen as a potential candidate for foreign minister. He was reportedly taken away by authorities after returning from a work trip overseas in late July.
That's according to the Wall Street Journal, citing people familiar with the matter. Fluent in English and seen as more friendly toward the West, Liu is widely seen as a potential foreign minister. He's also seen as someone who could take part in talks between the U.S. and China. Liu was in a group meeting with then Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C. last year. In China, he serves as the head of the Communist Party's International Department, an agency overseeing relations with foreign states. It's unclear why Liu was taken away. His most recent public visits were to Singapore, South Africa, and Algeria. Liu's detention marks the highest-level disappearance of a diplomat since China ousted its former foreign minister Qin Gang in 2023. Last month, Liu said he was optimistic about the future of U.S.-China relations and that it was unimaginable that China and the U.S. will ever go to war.
Liu studied international relations at Oxford for 1 year in the 1980s. Tensions on the high seas in a rare mishap for China's Navy. 2 Chinese ships collided while chasing Philippine Coast Guard and fishing vessels near the Scarborough Shoal. The contested waters are a rich fishing ground in the South China Sea just off the Philippines coast. Let's zoom in.
This is the latest flare-up of long-simmering territorial disputes in the busy waterway. Philippine authorities say a Chinese Coast Guard ship accidentally collided with a Chinese Navy ship while chasing a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. The Philippines says the Chinese Coast Guard ship sustained substantial damage. China seized the Scarborough Shoal in 2012 and has since restricted access to Filipino fishermen. In 2016, ruling by an international court found that most Chinese claims in the South China Sea were invalid, but Beijing has refused to abide by that. Reaction from the Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. He said Philippines ships defending its territorial interests in the South China Sea would never back down and would stand their ground in the contested waters. Marcos recently said his country would inevitably be drawn kicking and screaming into any war over Taiwan. This due to its proximity to the self-ruled island and the presence of large numbers of Filipino workers there. China accused Marcos of playing with fire over the comments.
We do not want any kind of confrontation with anyone. We want to build a better, stronger, freer, safer Philippines. That's what we are working for. This kind of confrontation does not build a stronger, better Philippines. All it does is continue to defend our country. So that's I'm a little bit perplexed why it would be characterized as such, as playing with fire.
China's embassy in Manila did not immediately respond to a request for comment about the president's remarks. The Chinese Communist Party's long arm is extending into Thailand, this time into the art world. Works of art that are critical of Beijing's treatment towards ethnic minorities have been pulled from one of Thailand's top galleries at China's request. The artists call it Beijing's latest attempt to silence critics overseas. Here's more.
We were quite shocked.
Sai, a Myanmar artist and the exhibit's co-curator, said Chinese embassy staff, accompanied by Bangkok city officials, entered the exhibition 3 days after it opened and demanded it be shut down.
It is such an ironic thing because this exhibition is all about the network of authoritarian regimes. And then while it is exhibiting, the network of authoritarian regimes are working together to shut this exhibition down.
When Reuters visited the Bangkok Arts and Cultural Center, some works previously advertised and photographed had been removed. Others had been altered, with the words Hong Kong, Tibet, and Uyghur redacted, along with the names of the artists.
So we fled before midnight, and on 27, 8:30 a.m., we landed London.
Sai said he was speaking from overseas, where he fled after Thai police sought to find him. In a July 30th email seen by Reuters, the gallery said due to pressure from the Chinese embassy, quote, "We have been warned that the exhibition may risk creating diplomatic tensions between Thailand and China." The email added that the gallery had, quote, "no choice but to make certain adjustments, such as obscuring the names of the Hong Kong, Tibetan, and Uyghur artists." Several days later, Tsai said the embassy demanded further removals. The Chinese embassy in Bangkok, the foreign ministry in Beijing, and Thailand's foreign ministry did not respond to multiple requests for comment. The Bangkok Metropolitan Administration referred Reuters to the gallery, which did not respond to an email seeking comment. An exhibit representative said the team had agreed not to comment on the issue. Beijing has denied allegations by rights groups that China carries out a sophisticated campaign of harassment against critics overseas that has often extended into the art world.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.